here. We'll do some introductions, hopefully. My name is Kelly Thompson. I am with Alex Partners in the Detroit area. I am on the legal ethics and compliance team. That's my day job. My day job is as America's regional ops leader for Pride Matters, which is the LGBTQ employee resource group for Alex Partners. I identify as bi and pan and poly. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am super excited to be here. This is my fourth Out and Equal, my second time presenting, and I can't wait to share with you what we have. Gabe, go ahead, take it away.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Gabe Cook. I am here in Dallas, Texas. So hi to everyone who's representing Texas. I am proud to be a colleague of Kelly Thompson here at Alex Partners. I am a director in our turnaround and restructuring consulting services. I'm also the local champion for Pride Matters, which is Alex's LGBTQ plus ERG. A couple of things to note. So obviously deeply committed to the LGBTQ plus community, alternative lifestyles, and women's empowerment, but also wanted to mention I am a total Harry Potter nerd. And I'm mentioning that, aside from it being very true, but because it's one of the genesis of this whole session. So for, hopefully, there are many people who are aware of Harry Potter and this wonderful world that a fantastic author, J.K. Rowling, created. And it's a world of equality. It's a world of open-mindedness. It's a world that features one of the, I think, greatest gay characters in fiction, Albus Dumbledore. And yet, this author, who's very clearly open-minded and supportive of gay and lesbian rights, actually came out with some comments a couple of years ago that showed a high level of discomfort around transgender rights. And so it brought up this idea, and we see this in our community every day, that even within as open a community as LGBTQ+, there can still be a lot of discomfort around different aspects of it. And I think that is as good a place as any to kick things off. By the way, Ravenclaw, love it. Thank you, Mara.
All right, Gabe, why don't you take this one to start us off?
Yeah, so just building on that idea, it's really about, as we think of the different broad spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community, where there is some discomfort. In the case of J-Ro, obviously she had some discomfort around a pretty important part. But even when we go to, say, Pride marches, there can be discomfort at different representation of Pride marches. There can be discomfort as newer generations are discovering, frankly, new forms of identity, what that might mean. And so this is really about finding that discomfort in the plus. Kelly, why don't you take it from here?
Yes, absolutely. So some of the things we want to do today, we want to reflect and embrace and brainstorm. And part of that is going to be on reflecting what you might or might not know about the plus identities. We're going to have several polling questions. We want you to be honest when we ask these polling questions and really dig deep into how we really feel and why we may feel that way. So we want you to bring your ideas, your questions, your curiosities, maybe even some anxieties to the session so that we can have an interactive, engaging, robust discussion. And we do want to embrace our discomfort when we do get uncomfortable during the session, which I said when and not if, because I expect that we will. Let's lean into that. We'll talk about why we're uncomfortable and what is an appropriate response going forward. It's not just about sitting with your discomfort. It's about figuring out how do we get comfortable and how can we have an appropriate response that's open and kind and inclusion for all. So the last thing I want to say is that we will brainstorm those ways to get uncomfortable. That will be kind of at the end. We're going to have a lot of discussion, a lot of chat, so keep the chats going. I see a lot of J.K. Rowling chats here. Thank you for that too. And we're going to get started in just a second here with some actual content. A couple administrative things. One, we really would consider this session a success if you leave here with more questions about these identities than you came with, and that you're off to the races to go look them up and learn about them yourselves as well. Or if you leave here with the realization that the plus identities really need our help and trying to figure out what we can do to create safe spaces for them. Now, if you're already comfortable with every single thing we talk about here, that is great. That's amazing. I think a big thumbs up. What the question then becomes is, how do you take that comfort level that you have and take it back to your own work organizations to help create those safe spaces and help the plus identities bring their authentic selves to the workplace? All right, so we're going to get started, right? Here we go.
All right, we'll kick it off with identifying the identities, which I recognize now sounds a little bit like a category in the game Jeopardy. We'll take identifying the identities for $200, but this is also our first polling question. And we'd like to ask you, what are the genders and sexualities that you're familiar with? We're spotting you a couple, right? Male, female, cisgender. So we're really interested in what people are aware of, what genders come to mind, what might even be thought of as a gender or not thought of as a gender. And let's see if we can get some, oh, love it, two-spirit, a gender, non-binary, awesome. Let's see, anything else popping up? Yep, great. Gender fluid, love it. Gender queer, gray gender, awesome. How do you get to the poll? That's the question. So Kelly, how did they get to the poll? We're getting, and if you're not able to get to the poll, the chat is working great. Gender non-conforming.
Marilou, can you jump in here for just a second? I can see the poll questions, but I cannot see the poll answers. I'm not sure how to instruct people.
By the way, if anybody could look at Timothy's comment, I'll just get to cue the video of the guy at the Pride March being asked how many genders there were and replying, I don't know, I just got here. That's fantastic.
And going back to the polls question, in the Pathable platform, right next to the chat, you'll see polls, files, and people, and you click on the polls and you'll be able to see the poll questions and then the responses from the participants.
Do we have to answer to see the participants or to see the results, Marilou?
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't have to, but
oh, there we go.
Yeah.
If you just click answer, we'll see it. I gotcha. Thank you so much.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot on here. So we'll put on some of the ones that we came up with, but I think, Gabe, you've got some more to talk about here.
Yeah, I just want to mention we got some great ones here. Trans feminine, trans masculine, NB, two-spirit, gender queer, gender fluid. And so while we've put some up here, I think we're going to be able to add more. But really, this idea, this wonderful idea that we're not limited in the ways that we might once have thought we were. Growing up when you're a kid, or if you're maybe of the pre-internet age, you really might have only had like those male, female, cisgender representations to think about. So gender is one that there's a little controversy around, obviously. Sexuality, though, this one can get really fun and interesting. Kelly, take it away.
Yes, we decided to use the word sexuality to also incorporate sexual orientation. Again, we're going to spot you a couple here. Straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual. But the next polling question, the second polling question, is similar to gender. What other kinds of sexuality or sexual orientations are you familiar with? You can just type them into the chat right there. But we did want to say that there is that overlap between sexual orientation and sexuality. And curious to know, yes, here we go. We're getting a lot in here. Asexual, allosexual, demisexual, multi-attraction spectrum. Oh, that's one I have not heard before. These are great. Apotheosexual. Am I pronouncing that right? I don't even know. We're going to learn some things as well, too. So this is great. This is great. And as we put some of these up here with gender and sexuality, and Gabe, you can jump in here when you want. But I'm curious how comfortable you are with these terms. Are there any terms on here that you think don't belong, or any terms that you're not familiar with that you want to learn more about? We're not going to go into definitions of every single one, but think about that on your own. You could put stuff in the chat too with how do these names affect you when you see them? Great. Do you have anything else for this one?
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about this, because we're actually getting some fantastic feedback in the polls and in the chat here. And I'm glad some of these things are being being raised. So there are some, such as scolio, that maybe haven't been recognized, right? I will tell you, I do a lot of work with LGBTQ plus youth, and I seem to come up with here new terms about whether it's genders or sexualities on a pretty regular basis, and find myself having to either ask for grace and ask for an explanation, or go Google it. Scolio, by the way, points to Mara. Yes, referring to people interested in trans people. So this is a great one. So thank you to the person who asked about why kink is on here. Also, I guess the same thing could be asked about why poly is on here. And so I'm curious, because we talk about sexuality and we talk about what that means, and it's actually probably a broader term than just the basics of who we're attracted to. It also can get into how we're attracted to people, under what circumstances, such as being asexual, where there may not be attraction, or it may be certain kinds of attraction, in different forms of the asexual spectrum, and going into demi and gray. And so I'm curious what folks might think about the inclusion of some of these terms. And is there a discomfort around them?
I don't think I understand the difference between pan and omni. Need to Google and read. Absolutely. We do have a glossary at the end. It's by no means full complete. We do not consider ourselves in-depth researchers, but we thought that would be helpful, and we will put this deck up in the platform when we're done here. So
yeah, sapio, that's another, it's a great one. Again, it's this idea that some terms we're probably really comfortable with, or we're comfortable with the idea of these being part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. Others we may not be. And I like to be clear, I don't think we're trying, neither Kelly nor myself, to say this is a definitive list of what should be included or even excluded. We're really just trying to put these out in the open and ask us all to think about what our level of comfort is with these different terms and how we think about those.
Oh, Identiversity has a great glossary. Thank you, Stacy. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but it's getting hard. That's okay though. That's great. Keep it coming. I want that to be the problem.
Yeah.
I've always felt there is only discomfort when there is a lack of information. I love that, Jessica. That's really great.
Yeah, and please keep that in mind, because we're going to talk a little bit later about where we think discomfort might go from. Let's see, some of them referring to preference more than sexuality. So I guess there's that question. And what's a preference? What's a sexuality? One of the arguments that sometimes comes up when this idea of preference is that really inherent to an individual? Some people would say it is, some people would say it's not. If it's a very strong part of an individual, is it truly a preference, or is that inherent to the quality? Or maybe it isn't. Like being kinky isn't really being a sexuality. I don't know. I actually don't have an answer one way or the other, but I think if somebody felt, say they were very much a part of, BDSM was very much a part of their life, would that be part of their sexual identity?
Someone is asking, help me understand why it is important to educate others about sexual preference in the workplace. That is a great question, and we are going to talk about that. And Roxanne, I saw that you noticed it's not a preference, it's an orientation or sexuality. Preference makes it sound like you decide. I think that's a great discussion point. We're going to get into a little bit about why that's important to be able to bring your authentic self to work, and we're going to have some slides for that, I think.
So, and I love Eve's comment. It's about belonging. I love Alice has just commented, is gender expansive replacing gender non-conforming? So, again, it's this idea that our terms are evolving, our sense of what's appropriate, but that's part of what creates discomfort. And I will fully admit, some of these are terms that come up and I'm not sure I'm comfortable. I don't know why that's the right term or the wrong term. Same thing about sexuality. There's certain things of preference or certain things part of our orientation. And looking at the chat, I think it's actually probably fairly normal for a lot of people's experience. Let's say, I think understanding someone's sexuality and sexual preference goes a long way to understand the limits of any potential interaction with someone. It is also a step to connection with people who are like. Oh, fantastic sentiment. That's in the chat on Pathable for anyone who has a chance to take a look at it. The process of continual evolution feels hard and uncomfortable, but at the same time, it's important to give people space to explore and learn and expand the realm of what we deem possible, and that's beautiful. Oh, that is so eloquent. That is so incredibly well put. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely love this. So,
All right.
like, yeah, I
let's
feel
go
like
on to maybe the next
that.
slide. All right, so we're going to talk about some statistics now. This is just stuff that we found on the internet. Again, we're not these in-depth researchers, but it's pretty easily found on the internet. Some of these newer plus identities, think about this when you're looking at these stats. They're showing up in statistics now because we're finally asking the questions about them. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are being born more gay or more ace or more pansexual. It just means that there are now, I think, there's a correlation between the rise of social media and the internet use with the rise of people being able to identify the way they want to and finding out that there is a word for them or a label or a category or whatever you want to call that. And they're able to resonate with that and say, oh, that's me. I want that. That's how I identify. So the fact that these stats, we're going to show some statistics in a second, and some might surprise you and some might feel like they're a little bit low or a little bit high. I'd be curious to know what you all think about that. Let's start with the first one, which isn't quite a stat, but you can talk about this one, Gabe.
Sure. Well, let's see if it pops up.
Yep, do you see it?
Nope.
Uh-oh. Are you seeing a blank screen?
I'm seeing the number of people identifying as plus is meaningful, and then it's a white space.
All right, well, my purple box is showing up for me, but I don't know if it's not showing up for everybody.
All right, is anyone seeing a purple box here? No purple, right?
No purple, oh no, okay.
All right, so I'm going
read
to read some of the stats as Kelly and our crack technological support work behind the scenes to get this resolved. So imagine, if you will, a purple box that pops up in the middle and says that the 2020 census did not ask about gender fluid or non-binary identities. You can only answer male or female. And I think we're all actually pretty aware of that. There was a lot of back and forth and battles over that question and the limitations that it puts on. But this is the type of question that's been asked for a very long time. And if you ask a very limited question, you're going to get very limited answers. As we expand the question set, though, then all of a sudden the answers start to expand. So another box that you're not seeing right now talks about how roughly 1 in 20 Americans identify as LGBT. And I apologize in advance. I know we have folks from Europe and Asia and South America and other parts of the world. And we don't have great stats for outside of the US. But as that point, that's that 1 in 20. When it came to millennials and Gen Z, it was 1 in 4. Now, to Kelly's point, is it because people are being born, quote, more gay? Or are they more comfortable in expressing who they are? Are they just being asked different questions? And a great example of the different question set is this a statistic that came up recently. I think it was just recently published in the Journal of Pediatrics. And it had about 1 in 10 high schoolers identified as gender diverse. And this was seen as like a very big deal because a couple years earlier, in a similar survey, less than 2% had identified as transgender. What it changed, though, was the questions that were asked. And so the question that got asked originally was, do you identify as transgender? The question that got asked the second time was, or two, what was your gender identity assigned at birth? And then what's the gender that you identify with? And it provided a very broad range of options. And that in turn led to a greater sense of diversity in capturing that. Kelly, how are we doing with the slides there?
We're doing good. Are you guys seeing any boxes up here? I'm just going to put them all up. It's all blank.
Yeah.
Huh? Okay.
All right. It's all blank.
Well, I can talk about the next few if you want. I'm sorry, guys.
We'll go for a couple of more. I know that this is unfortunately just me talking at this point, but we'll get to, oh, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that a lot. So let's talk a couple of things that were maybe described more in the sexuality and preference, or there was this debate about what's a preference, what's like, what's part of sexuality. 1 in 5 people have engaged in some sort of poly relationship. And for 20% of you, that might not be surprising, but there might be some that would find that surprising. And then another stat that was also very interesting was about roughly the same number, 1 in 5, have engaged in BDSM activity. 70% though have fantasized about it. Now, that was a study in the US. There is a study, since we have some great folks on from Europe, there's a recent study that was done in Belgium in which 50% of Belgians had participated in some form of BDSM activity. If you're interested in that, you can just Google 50 Shades of Belgian Gray. I'll be honest, when I clicked on that originally, I thought it was going to be about chocolate. So you learn something new every day. All right.
Marilu,
so,
I wanna interrupt for just a second. Marilu, I'm having some technical issues here, and I apologize. I'm not seeing really anything on my own screen. I tried to stop sharing and share again, but it didn't really pop up that way. And I don't know if I can leave the meeting and come back in or not. Marilu, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Is there a way for me to leave the meeting and come back in? Or because I'm hosting? Yeah.
Because you're host, it would probably kick everybody out.
Oh, we don't want that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm stuck here and I apologize. I don't know if Gabe, if you have any way to share. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys.
If I can pull this off.
It's okay. We're just embracing this
Embracing our discomfort.
Exactly what we were
That's
talking
right.
about earlier. You know?
That's right. This was a planned part of the session, guys, just to see if we can mix up the technical issues here.
We appreciate everyone leaning in. Wow. So it turns out that I run into the same problem, and I don't know if it's Zoom or what it is, but let's
yeah.
Right, let's see if there's a way of. All right, we'll give this one more shot. Okay, maybe we'll try.
If you're sharing a platform and not a screen, that makes a difference. I don't really know what I was sharing, so.
Okay, so we're gonna try this, and I appreciate everyone bearing with us, and we ask you for grace. So let's see if this, can people see this?
Oh, I saw something.
All right, are folks seeing a screen?
Oh, there we go. Yes, we're getting lots of yeses.
All right, that is fantastic. So
okay, I see a lady having a wonderful time. So maybe we go back up one.
No, we're gonna have to keep it here.
All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so this is the start of a few questions. This is gonna be part of the polling. And Kelly, I'll ask you to keep track of the pathable in the chat.
Yes, yes.
I have fantastic limited ability to multitask here. So Kelly, why don't you start off?
Yeah, so we're going to ask some questions. The next few polling questions, the third one is the first one we're going to start with. We're going to show you some pictures and we're going to present a scenario. And then we want you to rate your comfortability, I guess, level on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being you're very uncomfortable and 5 being you're very comfortable. So the pictures are kind of a generic abstract representation of the scenario. You're really looking at the scenario and deciding how comfortable you are. So I cannot see the screen, but I assume we're on the first one.
We are. We
Okay.
are.
So on a scale from 1 to 5, with 1 being very uncomfortable and 5 being very comfortable, what is your comfort level in working with a bisexual female colleague? We're going to start off with a little bit of a softball here. And actually,
Seeing a
let's
lot
see
of
if I can see.
a 10.
Nice, nice. I actually can't see the poll results, but I hope that you can, Gabe.
Funny. Well, I was seeing, so folks are doing a great job of putting it into the chat. I work with myself all day.
20.
That's
Nice.
great. 5.
Lots of 5s.
All right. High level of comfort.
Yes.
And
5, that's good. Okay, that's kind of what we expected. I think we were not this again. We're starting with an easy one. We're going to kind of move a little bit forward here. Do you want to go to the next slide, Gabe?
yes. All right.
Okay.
So let's say, oops, here we go.
Okay,
Right.
on a scale from 1 to 5, again, 1 very uncomfortable, 5 very comfortable. How comfortable would you be if your male son announced he was bisexual? And this kind of leans into the acceptance or non-acceptance of female bisexuals versus male bisexuals. Sometimes there's a lag there. And I cannot see the polls, Gabe, so sorry. I can see the chat.
So I don't know the polls, I'm seeing the chat.
Okay. I work with myself all day. I love that, Marissa, that's funny.
Yeah.
Lots of 5s to infinity and beyond. Okay, that's great.
Repeatedly. So, someone asked made the great comment. I'd wonder if it's, cisgender folks would have different scores. This is obviously a certain group that this type of workshop appeals to within a audience, a organization that's going to attract certain people. But I really like some of the comments that we're getting here. There are a lot of 5s, but there's also some discomfort that's being expressed here as well. Not necessarily because someone's uncomfortable, with the son being bi male, but maybe discomfort over how the world might treat them.
Yeah, we had a comment about that. I'm all for it, but I'd be scared of how the world will treat him. That's very honest and legit.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable for their difficulties. That's a great one. They're uncomfortable. They might feel uncomfortable for that person's difficulties that they might face. That's very, very legitimate.
Yeah, that's actually really, really profound. All right, let's see.
All right, should we go to the next one?
Yes.
All right, I will take this one too. All right, you see one of these photos on a colleague's desk. They talk about their weekend activity with their partners plural. How comfortable are you to join that conversation? Lots of 5s coming up. I am that coworker. Okay, great. 3, good. Thank you for being honest. 4s, 5s. Happy for him to have the ability to love anybody. That's amazing. 3, and jealous of their bravery. Yes. These are great. Comfortable, but want to be able to ask questions. I think that kind of sums up a lot of our comfortability. Do we even feel comfortable to ask the questions? Do we even know what questions to ask? Are we too scared to even ask a question because we're afraid we're going to be offensive? That could be part of your discomfort for sure.
Yeah,
They're great.
These are really great. So I'll say that I would probably be a 3, and I think for some of the reasons that people are expressing, I'm not sure how to begin the conversation or what would be appropriate or inappropriate to ask about.
I am a 5 all the way, considering I am poly, but it might be, maybe it's not the same as seeing, a grandma with a baby or a man and a woman in a wedding, a wedding picture. Maybe it's not the same, but I would love to see a picture like that on someone's desk and I would jump right into it. That's because that's who I am.
Great way of saying it, and yeah, Gina, really good point, talking about being here in Texas. So
Yeah.
where we are in the world is going to have an impact on comfort levels, especially in the workplace. And we're fortunate in some parts of the United States and in certain companies where there's a greater level of openness, acceptance, in which this is very actively encouraged from the top down, where DEI is part of the fabric of the business. And let's also think about the other side, where there are parts of this world where being seen as gay can put you in prison, or frankly worse. And so really where you are can have a very big impact on comfort level.
Right, right.
Respectful of that.
Mm-hmm.
All
right. I'm conscious of time too. We're at the halfway mark, so let's maybe go to the next one.
And
you can
now
take this one if you
I think we'll take this one.
Yep.
So how comfortable are you with a colleague whose gender expression changes between Monday and Friday of the same week? For anyone wondering, no, that's not me. That is the fabulous Ruby Rose. But if a colleague shows up on Monday and is presenting a more feminine expression or a feminine energy even, and then by the end of the week is presenting and expressing a more male expression, how would you feel about that? How would you interact, or do you have the same level of comfort with that individual? Also great, seeing 5s, 4s, 3s. Okay, all over the place. For someone that maybe doesn't have the highest level of comfort, why? If anybody feels comfortable sharing with that. Ruby Rose can express herself any way she damn well pleases. I agree with that.
I agree with that too.
Yep.
You know what? I want to just go back to one person's comment on the poly one. Of course, now I can't find it. The pictures, talking about the photos, not screaming that they're poly. So to assume that the person is poly just by those photos would be, a mistake, which you're absolutely right. We would not want to assume anything. We were trying to find some pictures that might spark a conversation where someone would say, oh, who are these people? Or, what's this picture about? But you're absolutely right.
All right. Sia, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Great comment. I'd be very comfortable as long as I could talk to them and figure out how I can know how to address them, name and pronouns, depending on their preference for the time. I completely relate to that. I think that's a fantastic way of expressing that.
Yeah, some 3s, some 4s. I don't want to offend any by questions, but I'm not sure how to address the person. That's right. I think we all don't want to offend, and that's fair too.
Yeah, and so some of this might get into, what we're not saying, just as a quick note, maybe this will change in the next couple of slides. We're not seeing many 1s and 2s.
No, we're not.
This might just be, we've got a very open-minded group, and there's certain self-selection and participating in this workshop, but it is very broad-minded. It's also one of those things, as you think about the people you work with, I wonder if they'll have the same level of open-mindedness.
Right.
All right, now we're going to get into another couple of fun ones. So, all right, this is, let's see if I can advance the slide. Okay. All right, how comfortable are you with a colleague who announces they marched in a pride parade?
Just based on the answers we've had before, I'm guessing you're all going to answer 5 to this one, but who knows?
I'm guessing there are folks who, if there was a pride parade going on, would be dialing in from it. 10s, 5s, right? I mean, this is, again, to think about the world as it is. There are at least places in the world today where you can march in a pride parade. You can let a colleague know that you marched in a pride parade. And frankly, all sorts of people will march in a pride parade. There are plenty of folks who I don't even know that they're, not only are they straight and cisgender, they may not even be allies. They just really like a parade, and they get into the emotion of it. So yeah, a lot of fives, a lot of very positive support.
And just to think about one thing, if I could just interject here, one thing to think about is if we had asked this question 40 years ago, I think the answers might be a little bit different, because just attending a pride parade, in the late 70s, early 80s was a big deal. And maybe you wouldn't want to be found or telling your coworkers when you came in, hey, I marched in the parade. So it's interesting to see how these questions are timeless in the question, but the answers are going to change for sure.
Absolutely. And by the way, Laura, yes, not only does skating and count in one, I think you get bonus points for.
Yes. All right, let's get to the next one here.
Yeah, we'll do that. So now that you have that in your mind, a colleague has announced that to you they've marched in a pride parade, you have this image, you're very, very comfortable, and then you happen to later be on social media and you're scrolling around and you find these pictures of them after they said they were at the parade. What is your comfort level now?
All right, still got some fives coming in.
All right, I feel like this is one where we're getting a little slower reactions on this one, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I think people
not so comfortable with this. Does it imply pain is involved? That's a good question to ask. I've seen some of these, but I don't know what they mean. Kink needs to be consensual. Yes, we agree on that.
Yep. Great.
Threes and fours.
Yep. Community love it.
Yep. My intrigue number goes up. Okay.
All right. Gotta admit, the Dog Master, not my personal jam, but a 4. I love that. I appreciate that. American Horror Story. He looks like a very good boy. This is great. 5, but I definitely wouldn't bring it up to them in a work environment unless they invited the conversation. Not everyone wants to their kinks known or shared around at work. That's a really great point to make. And again, this is, I'd circle back to when we were talking about identities, and we had some folks asking why kink or BDSM or poly were part of sexuality. And we also had a number of people saying that actually that's could be a very important part of sexuality. And this is an expression of it. One of the reasons we wanted to have this set of pictures, and by the way, full credit to my wonderful colleague, Kelly, for coming up with these pictures and laying them out in this way, is usually around Pride Parade and in a Pride Month, there will be a lot of discussion and back and forth about inclusion of kink, BDSM, drag, and pride parades. There could be a view that, well, it's not family friendly, or it's outside the mainstream, that it makes being, quote, just gay or lesbian harder to be accepted. And it's like, here's a great comment that goes on this, that goes to this point. I don't understand the value of kink type elements in the context of the workplace, and feel it could be damaging to the LGBT plus community. That's actually a really great, that's exactly kind of the point I was trying to express, Donal. And that's valid, just as a lot of people would find it valid the other way as well. There is a sense of discomfort. And again, Kelly and I aren't here to say that one way is right or not, but recognizing where does our discomfort come from? For myself, as someone who's much more involved in alternative lifestyles, thinking about, all right, what do I want to share? in the workplace, or what would I want colleagues to know about me? That's always a question that I have in my mind. So really, really appreciate everybody's openness and thoughtfulness on these. Shall we go to the next section, Kelly?
Yes, apologies again, I can't see, but I know where we are, so let's keep going.
All right, so take it from here.
All right, so now that we have asked some of these questions about these identities and how you may feel about them, let's ask the next kind of obvious question is, where does this discomfort come from? And a lot of times we have this anxiety or this maybe curiosity that's a little more positive than discomfort. Maybe we don't call it discomfort, but when we have that anxiety or discomfort, where is it coming from? Sometimes that's hard to answer. Sometimes you don't know where it's coming from. You just have a feeling and I just don't feel right about this, or I don't know where to go next with this. I don't know how to interact with this person now, or I'm not sure how to interact with this person. That uncertainty is also a big player there. Just because you are feeling uncomfortable about something, it doesn't make you wrong. It doesn't make you bad necessarily, but figuring out where that discomfort comes from is a big step in moving towards trying to get comfortable. So I think we did have some questions on this slide, but I'm curious to know, now that I've been talking this whole time, what the chat says.
Yeah. Are you able to see the chat?
I am. I'm able to see the chat. That's all I can see.
Okay. Well, it's
good.
It's good because we're getting some great things coming here. Let's see. Oh, Shell, this is a great one, if you don't mind me reading. Coming from the deep South, where being, quote, just lesbian or gay was how you got married on Saturday and fired and evicted on Monday. It's hard to be open about the mildest things, much less something like this. I think that might have been referring to the BDSM kink-oriented slide, but this also really gets to this idea of discomfort. Depending on where you are, what your environment is, what the mores of your workplace are. I mean, I'll give an example where I have a good friends here in Dallas, and one of their children recently came out as trans, and so they moved to LA. Even though Dallas itself has some very liberal communities, actually has a pretty vibrant LGBTQ plus community, they felt that it was just safer for them to raise her in Los Angeles. So let's see, I get uncomfortable talking about kink, synonymous to discussing sex positions. Okay, so that's a really interesting point, Carol, kind of like at what point does something become a sexual discussion versus kind of an identity or a preference or a sexuality discussion. So let's see if we can get some more on the actual discomfort and where we think it can come from. All right, so being able to get feedback. So if we don't know how a person wants to be approached or what a person's level of comfort is in talking through things, that can actually cause a little discomfort. That's actually how I feel when it comes to those pictures about poly or gender fluidity. I'm just not sure what I can ask. Let's see, what else?
And I think there's also, was a couple comments about it's okay if people don't share, if they don't want to share. And absolutely, that is the case. When we talk about bringing our authentic selves to work, how I interpret that is to be able to bring however much of your life to your workplace that you can or that you want to do without having to cover it up or hide it. So if you've got things that you don't really want to share with your colleagues because you don't feel it's appropriate or you're just not a sharer, that's different than not being able to share because people are talking about what they did on the weekend and now you don't feel comfortable doing that because you went out with your poly friends or you went to a kink parade and you don't feel like that's appropriate. And to someone else's point too, someone said, I don't feel comfortable talking about sexuality and bedroom behavior in the workplace. Absolutely, that's a concern. So at what level does it become not appropriate for the workplace versus is this a part of who I am, and I'd like to share who I am with someone.
Yeah, and bearing in mind, there is this difference between sexuality and sex, right? I mean, talking about one's sexuality is different than saying, here's a graphic description of how, I did X, Y, or Z. I would say, at least personally, I think the latter, probably is not appropriate for a workplace discussion. Maybe amongst friends, very specific friends, if you have that. But
maybe if you have a different workplace.
Yeah, I think Lily, has this great, professionalism does not have a gender. Love that. But it also gets this idea of what we get, what's professional. Just to put a few others out there, comments that I think are really great. There's this, the internalized phobias, Amber, that's great. Sometimes we just have things, we're not even sure where they come from. Discomfort from not knowing. I like to know what I'm talking about, and not knowing makes me anxious. I feel actually the same way, and that sometimes that anxiety will cause me to close up or to avoid, frankly, an uncomfortable conversation. I think it's okay to say I'm poly, but I don't know how I feel about that person describing what they do in the bedroom. Yeah, so I almost think if we were to say the bedroom type activities is maybe the area where people are going to say, yeah, that's something that, two straight people, very, very straight people, would hopefully not necessarily have that conversation at work either. It's not about whether or not somebody is part of the LGBTQ plus spectrum. It's just there's certain oversharing. But we're also trying to get into this idea of, is oversharing just who we are? That's one thing. Is oversharing exact activities? That is something else. Manuela, the question is, if you see these photos on a social media of a colleague and then feel uncomfortable and not be able to talk about, your opinion and behavior towards this colleague might shift. And maybe then it'd be better to have that conversation rather than making assumptions. Oh, that is terrific. So I think that's actually a great segue to our next slide, Kelly.
Yes, absolutely. So we're at the part now where we've talked about all of this discomfort or lack of discomfort. A lot of you guys have very open minds and came to this session with very open hearts. I really appreciate that. But what do we do to make someone feel comfortable in these plus identity spaces? Is it the same effort that we do to make the LGBT community feel safe? Are there different ones? We have some ideas, and we're going to plug them in at the end before we upload our final deck. But we'd be curious to know what people think about what would we like to be doing as a society, as a workplace, to be able to help those plus identities feel more comfortable at the workplace.
Ask questions to better understand.
Yes. It's one thing to talk about your relationships at work. It's another thing to talk about what gets you off. Okay, you're right. There are two different things there. Those are two different things. Display a pride flag in your office to show support. I'm a really big fan of that. It seems like such a small gesture, but I'm a really big fan of passively supporting things. I also am a big fan of aggressively supporting things. If you know my personality, that's how I roll. But also having that sticker, having that flag, having something that says this is a safe space in your workspace, that can go a long way to a colleague that might just be walking by and passing your desk, and they keep walking by every day and they see that and they think, oh, as they get to know you, they think, oh, she's maybe a safe person to talk to, or he's someone I could maybe ask a question for. So don't dismiss those small gestures of having a flag at your desk, having a sticker on your laptop, that kind of thing.
Yeah, Lily, it's kind of summed up really well. Make your alliedness obvious.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Really love the don't fear differences.
Yes.
That's another
Some of these are coming up in the ones that we have too, but include them in the conversation, panels, events, include their perspectives. I think that's a huge one, to be able to amplify their voices in actual events. When you have events about the plus identities, have people from plus identities being presented. Gabe and I, consider ourselves part of some of this plus identity stuff. So we thought this would be a good time to be able to get this conversation out there and start talking about it. So amplifying their voices is always a big plus, to be able to make people feel more involved.
Some other great ones, Nicole, work on using neutral language and not making assumptions. Derek, embrace that everyone is different, and open dialogue of acceptance and validation. Really, normalizing. I mean, if we think about this idea, Kelly brought this up when we were talking about the Pride Parade in general. There was a time when that was not as quote normal as it is now. Being at least gay or lesbian is somewhat, in some areas, more normal. But there's other parts, just being transgender, within the larger queer umbrella, within this plus spectrum, there's parts that aren't feeling normalized. And there's some great comments that have been made that in certain places, being seen as gay can, in and of itself, historically be seen as a negative. To add like another layer of sexuality onto that, might make things even more challenging. Mm-hmm. So I know we're running out of time. I want to ask a general question, and I think we're getting at this. This comes from I don't know if we have anyone who's joined from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, but I have a great friend there as part of their DEI initiative. And I certainly don't want to speak for BCG, but my understanding is they actually do some amazing things to create a diverse and equitable and inclusive environment. And being consultants, of which I'm one, and much like engineers, we often tend to think in terms of playbooks and frameworks and, oh, if this is how I should act, or if I do this, this person does this, I should do this. And one of the things that they discovered from talking to kind of experts in the field and behavioral scientists were these idea of playbooks don't work super well. Rather, it was principles. And what principles can you bring to the table, this idea of guidelines that are going to help you and your colleagues bring their authentic self to work. And I think that's actually what we've been getting, is this idea of, for example, asking questions. So being curious and being open to people become very important. Being kind is a big one as well. And I'm curious, as we kind of get to the last 5 minutes, what other guidelines or what advice does anyone want to kind of put out there for this, wonderful group of other things that we might be able to do to help people be more comfortable?
I see the pronouns in the email signatures coming up a lot too. That's another passive way to just say that you are an ally, and having your pronouns out there, because that's important to other people to be able to say their pronouns. So that's a big one too. And I like, we are trying to implement a healthy tension conversation session at my company. I love that. So really, leaning into this might be kind of tense, it might be kind of uncomfortable, but let's have the conversation anyway. I love that. Pronouns in your Zoom, yes.
Pronouns on ID badges by default, love that.
Yes, that's a great one. We will include these all in the final deck. We have some that we have already really talked about: being open, being kind, being inclusive with your language, calling them in, amplifying their voices. We will put all of that on this last slide, including some of the ones that we're seeing here.
All right, so I think we've got some great pride flag and signature. I love that one. I think we've really got some great conversations, some great ideas, and some great input. I appreciate the openness here. People have come with different experiences. They've asked questions. I think there were some topics that did create some discomfort, which is really what we were hoping to do. I think there might be other areas where people found they actually were very comfortable with a very broad range of that LGBTQ plus spectrum. And now it becomes, how do they help create a comfortable environment for others in the workplace as well? So we really, really appreciate everybody's participation. We know that there's a lot of things going on, especially on a Friday afternoon, and coming here and being morally present in your authentic self means so much to us. Kelly, do you want to close out?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for everybody for joining, for having such a robust and engaging chat feature. Thank you for winging it, Gabe, when I had tech issues. So I really appreciate that. I've still no idea what's happening, but I don't really want to click anything and accidentally get kicked out. So thank you everybody for coming. We will put the deck with some extra information in this session, so you should be able to download that. And I would just like to say to everybody that attended here, if you feel like connecting with me on social media, on LinkedIn especially, I have my LinkedIn link in my profile for Out and Equal. I'd be happy to chat with you, happy to learn more about what you're doing in your organization, and just have those networking opportunities. Feel free to do that.
Yeah, same here as well. We thank everybody so much for your participation and your broad-mindedness, and really just so fantastic. Thank you for making this a very special session and workshop, and we really appreciate it. We hope everyone has a great rest of Out and Equal and a fantastic weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Gabe, are you still there?
He just left.
Okay, I don't even know how to leave. I can't even see anything. So I'm going to shut down my computer because I don't even know how to get out of this.
Okay.
But thank you so much. I will want to upload our deck to that file site. I can still do that after the session, right?
Yes.
Okay, I will do that next. I will reboot my computer and we will go from there. Thank you so much for your help.
Awesome. Have a good weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.